My name is Vixie Bell, and I am your host for today's episode of Weal or Woe at the Pocket Dragon. You've seen me be a player and a game master here, and now let me serve up some great games for you to try out. I'd like to welcome our guest barkeeps who will be joining me today. Welcome to the show, guys. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves so our wonderful viewers know who you are?
Hi, everybody. I'm Amber, also known as The Space Jamber. I am a 3-time Emmy-nominated TTRPG writer, editor, podcaster, and streamer for Necrobiotic and Flabbergasted. You can find me anywhere there's internet at The Space Jamber, particularly on Threads, because that's where I'm living now. The Bird app, it's not birding anymore. I'm really excited to dive into these cozy games. They're kind of like my bread and butter. So thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Cass. You will find me mostly these days on Etsy. I'm a dice maker. And so you'll find me there at the Fire Genasi in Disguise. Shh, don't tell anyone. And hopefully in the next year or so, I'm going to be on Twitch at beaniest_bop, VTubing with probably TTRPGs, Stardew Valley, Cozy Games. And I'm super excited to be at the Pocket Dragon.
Yay!
Yay, welcome. We're so excited to have you guys here. And I can't wait for your Twitch, Cass. That's going to be great. And Amber, I'm just in awe of all of you, that you've accomplished. Holy crap.
Yeah, that's,
Can I grow up and be like that? Maybe someday?
Anyway, TTRPG, those are not words that I thought go together, but I'm so proud of you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm so excited that we're doing one of my favorites, cozy games. I love cozy games, and I think it's perfect to open up with the holiday season. So if you saw our first episode of Weal or Woe, you know that this is a review show. We are going to look at different games, and we're going to review them and decide whether or not we're excited about them, which means we'll give it a wheel, or maybe there's some stuff that needs to be improved upon before we really want to look at playing them, and that means we'll give it a whoa. That doesn't mean the game is bad, so don't start up on that. We're not saying any game is bad here at all. What we're saying is that there are certain things that maybe don't draw us to the game or don't make us excited about the game that maybe could be tweaked or improved upon, or maybe not. Maybe you know, if we're reviewing a game and you've played it before and you really like it, you see it a different way than we do. Our opinion is not the end-all be-all. It's just an expression of what we're excited to try. The goal of the show is to introduce people to different TTRPGs that they can play with friends and maybe broaden your perspective on the kinds of TTRPGs that are out there. So I just want you all to go into the show knowing that, so that no one jumps down our throats talking to us like we don't know what we're talking about. We do, and we know what we like and don't like. So there. Anyway, moving on, we should get right into our reviews. Today we are reviewing 3 wonderful cozy games, and I'm so excited about all 3 of them, actually, because they're all great. The first one is Mausritter by Isaac Williams and published by Losing Games. Mausritter is a game where players become mouse knights, which is what the name Mausritter means, in a mouse-sized fantasy world. Who doesn't want to be a mouse? So exciting. The next game is Wanderhome by J Dragon and published by Possum Creek Games. You have no idea how much I love this game. They released the collector's edition book, and I'm dying because there's a part of me that's like, shut up and take my money. But anyway, Wanderhome is a pastoral fantasy role-playing game about traveling animal folk, the world they inhabit, and the way the seasons change. It is indeed about the journey, not the destination, which is one of the reasons that Wanderhome is such a fun game. And the last one you may know from COVID, because apparently it was a popular COVID game, believe it or not, when we were all, locked up inside our homes. And that is A Quiet Year by Avery Alder. In A Quiet Year, you define the struggles of a community living after the collapse of civilization. And you're attempting to build something good within your quiet year. So those are the 3 games we are going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and get started with Mausritter. Amber, I know you had some feelings about Mausritter. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So before today, Mausritter was the only game on this list that I'd never played. But oh my gosh, it is absolutely, it's so adorable. I kind of really love this idea. I think we called it like a little guy simulator. Any game that kind of helps me feel like I'm playing a little guy simulator, I'm already sold. But this, I mean, Mausritter, if you just want to get up to like small guy adventures and like get up and create hijinks, and I mean, this is it. This is perfectly designed for just quickly putting something together, rolling on a bunch of really small, short, easily digestible tables, and then you can have a game ready to go in minutes. So it's just perfect. Wow, amazing. Thank you, little mice.
Thank you, little mice. I love that. And what about you, Cass? What are your feelings on Mausritter?
I think Mausritter is, yeah, in a word, it's adorable, right? But it is. So coming at this from my perspective, I'm a 5e person, primarily. A lot of people start there, and I think that I stayed there because it is, it's the TTRPG.
Exactly.
But, honestly, Mausritter has a lot of the elements that draw me to 5e. But why can't we be just a little mouse guy in Dungeons and Dragons? Because you can't. You can't be a little mouse guy. But what if everybody was a little mouse guy? What if you wanted to run Secret of Nim? And I think Mausritter is catering to a very specific demographic of people who want to be mice. But that's my demographic, so I adore it. I think it's absolutely, it's adorable. What do you want me to say?
Well, for sure, Mausritter is such a wonderful game, and like you said, it's very Secret of Nim. And although it wasn't one of the inspirations, we did mention that this also sounded like Tale of Despero, if you're familiar with the little film about the Mouse Knight. It's a very cute game. Let's start with the first of these categories. That is the mechanics. How do we feel about the mechanics in Mausritter?
Well, I feel like, Cass, you brought up a really great point. Like, yeah, it helps having knowledge in 5e and what to do in 5e as kind of like your base to be able to understand this game a little bit better. I feel like if this is somebody's first TTRPG, they might be a little confused because there's some terminology in here that is like, especially when it comes to the mechanics, that I feel like even though this might be a game this is like a newbie's game, if you already have experience in TTRPGs, if this is your first one, it might be more intermediate for you. So yeah, I'm kind of two minds here about it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're coming at this from a zero sum, you've never played a TTRPG before, you've never seen a 20-sided die, it does do a good job in the handbook of explaining how the terminology that it is going to use. And because of that, I'm going to say that it's more intermediate than advanced, but there is a little bit of mental gymnastics for the more not seasoned, but to all of us COVID players of D&D who got really into D&D during lockdown and then just didn't play anything else because that's a big thing. It does flip a lot of the D&D rules on their heads. So if you go in knowing that, I think you'll be fine. There are fewer stats than the average character sheet, which is helpful, but the backgrounds I think are my favorite thing. There's no rigidity in the backgrounds the way there are in a lot of other RPG systems. If you're a cage dweller, you decide what that means.
Yeah.
Were you a pet? You probably weren't a test subject because that's a different thing, but were you in a pet store?
The sci-fi.
Were you caged in a barn somewhere, And I do really like the flexibility with that. They give you one character trait and then you're totally free to go crazy. And I think that from a mechanical standpoint, that makes everything a lot easier to manage. because you're not going, oh, well, do I have to make a charisma save? I am this person. Like, no, you don't.
No, that is something that I do like about the game, is that it does simplify a lot of the mechanics that we're used to in 5e. And I know we're coming at this with a lot of experience in 5e. I'm a 5e player too. However, when it comes to newbies playing this game, I do think that if you're building a game quickly, having 5e experience helps with building a character. I think if this is your first game, your GM should probably want, whoever's GMing the game should invest a little more time into working with newbies, because it's really not that hard. You have 3 stats, all of which are fairly easy to roll up. You have a strength, will, and a dex. That's 3 stats. Easy enough. Probably the most difficult part is knowing which die is which. I agree that if you're going to just sit down and play this game, it's probably better for more intermediate players. You'll probably have want to, not just 5e, but maybe played a couple more TTRPGs before, just because we've seen 5e players get hung up on how 5e mechanics versus Mausritter mechanics. So in a way, it's a catch-22, because you're so bound to 5e rules that you misperceive the Mausritter rules, because they're definitely not the same. I think one of the interesting things about the mechanics is that natural 20s don't matter, and natural ones do. So I was like, this is the first game I've seen where natural ones are like the best thing you can roll in a given situation, and I do love that. I was like, okay, I like that. It turns that sort of mechanic on its head, which I like. But yeah, definitely, it's definitely a game for intermediate players. Do you guys think this affects immersion, or do you think it's a little bit more clunky?
Any opportunity to like have the players to be able to quickly understand the mechanics of the game, to be able to really feel like, okay, I got it. I understand how saves work. I understand, great, attacks always hit, so I don't have to roll to hit. I understand how hit protection works. I mean, the quicker you get those pieces, the quicker it is for you to really think of yourself as your little guy, your little mouse.
Yes.
So removing any barrier of entry for even new and experienced players alike is going to be easier for so many people. Especially if you have a table full of neurodivergent people like myself, who might sometimes struggle with grasping mechanics if they're a little bit too complex. I really think that Mausritter lays all of those out very easily and simply, again, for new and old players alike, so that they can easily slip right in and get to be your little guy of your dreams, man.
Yeah, right? Such a little guy.
Number one little guy. I
think for me personally, my brand of neurospicy, I like rules when they make sense. And a lot of the times, listen, I love 5th edition. I really do. But armor class makes no sense, and I'll fight to the death. But on the opposite side, hit protection. That makes a lot of sense. There's a usage mechanic in this game.
Yes.
And it's a little deceptive up front, because we were talking about it earlier today, but it looks very rules light from a player's side. But the GM has their own separate, section of the handbook. As a player, like, you're just doing things. You're not bound and constrained by, oh, well, this is really more of a monk move to do this flip.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, but what if I'm not, and it doesn't matter?
Yeah. In this game, your class is mouse.
Your class is mouse.
That's your class is mouse. Ugh.
Your actions are dictated by your personality and how you think your character would react in that moment. And your damage is, did they hit the button? And if they did, well, that button's cracked now. And eventually you're going to start taking hits,
Yep. I think the interesting thing about this game too is that it does have a set of rules. Like, you have rolls, you have dice, and you have things that you use to facilitate consequences, but they don't have the same impact in the role play necessarily. Like, I feel like it's a much more role play oriented game. in that sense. Because the GM does have a bunch of things that they roll, but they don't actually have to roll that all the time. And one of the things that I love is that in combat, attacks always hit. Period. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. It's attacks always hit. And it makes it so easy as a GM because you're like, okay, this hits. How much damage did they take? And then you can flavor how that damage is taken. So for example, 1 point of damage. Oh no, it scraped you and hit the wall, things like that. And it's one of the few games where it's like, look, Matt, you can die, roll another mouse and keep going. And get back into the game as soon as possible, which is, I think, it's something very interesting to say in a game. I think
character creation is really fast too. Like you could roll a mouse in 10 minutes and just get right back up.
Well, I was going to say, or, Mausritter provides a generator, which is what I used. And so I just hit, if my, I could just hit refresh and have a new mouse instantly.
Exactly. It's a simple game to set up and play. The hardest part is making sure you get those rules right. Like there's little mechanics like the GM does what's called a luck roll, which is basically a roll that determines what happens if it falls outside the purview of the 3 stats, which is very interesting, I think. And then you have tables where you can roll for traps and things like that. And, they even go as far as to have examples of what play looks like. So if you have more time, and you don't have to set up a game in 10 minutes, you have the ability to really get a good feel for this game, I think. And like Cass was saying earlier, it's very flexible when it comes to character creation and when it comes to a narrative as well. These are mice. So as a GM, your job is to make everything enormous. They're mice sized. They're not people sized. So very much those like The Borrowers, Secret of Nim, all of those great shows where you're talking about tiny people living tiny lives. But yeah, so it's definitely something that I enjoy. And like Cass was saying earlier with the characters, you have specific things, but those things are so narratively open, you can do whatever you want with them. So I do like that about the mechanics as well.
I also appreciate that there's no intelligence stat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rolling low or high on intelligence can really make or break a lot of TTRPG players' experience. Because if you just have to be stupid all the time, well, that can get old,
Yeah.
But in this game, it's like, I can make a dumb decision. That doesn't mean I'm beholden to being dumb.
It just means that you made a dumb move.
Or you could, it's up to you to be like the himbo of the party,
Yes.
It's not related to your stats. You were making the executive choice of doing that. And that's kind of what I love about that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a little bit about mechanics, let's talk about the story and narrative.
Well, I feel like the world itself is in the hands of the players. You're given these like really, really, really rough guardrails of, okay, you're just playing as mouse. Everything is mouse size. And you're going on little mouse adventures. Go. And like, of course, you get further down through the game book and you read some of the examples of play. You see, how the mechanics actually go through and help you be in this mouse world. But in some of the tables that the GMs roll onto to establish settlements are really sweet and wonderful too. Yes. But they're like just cute. They're just wonderful little flavor details to really empower everyone at the table, not just the GM, but everyone to feel like they actually have a piece of this world that's theirs and uniquely theirs that doesn't belong to any other table. And again, it's cute as hell.
Love it.
I think my favorite thing is that we keep bringing up the Secret of Nim, but it is very Secret of Nim, where humans exist, right? And mice do interact with them. There are still pet cats that you have to contend with, which, as far as TTRPG boss monster, mouse versus cat is a classic for a reason.
Yes, for sure.
But we also have this super creative sandbox, especially for a GM to play in, where the mice have their own society. They make tools. They have cheese cold storage.
Yes, cheese cold storage. I love that. It was so great.
You know, there are carpenter mice and tour guides.
Yes.
And you can just be anything. You just pick a human thing and then you can make it mouse. And I think that's a way to get super relatable and immersed in it.
Yep. And I think that's really interesting because we answered another question within that realm of story narrative criteria, and that's flexibility. Because the premise is really easy to navigate. You have those rough guardrails, like you said, and it's much more of an outline that the GM and the players can fill in themselves, which I personally really enjoy. Especially because I've had GMs before that have said, I'll build the world around you, just make the characters. This is very conducive to that sort of mentality. You build the characters, I'll build the world around you. As far as the only other question left to answer there really is, how fresh is the narrative to you guys? Have you seen this before? Is this presented in a new and different way?
Okay, I wouldn't say it's a fresh narrative.
Okay.
But that being said, I don't think it's been trod into the dirt. It's
a good point.
I'm very familiar with the concept of a tiny mouse society.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we've had so much play with perspective over the course of just human history. But that being said, there are a lot of very fresh elements to it.
Right.
Like a little, what's a mouse going to do with a razor blade? Make a pickaxe, I guess. Yeah, not where I would have gone.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense,
Well, I mean, for cheese.
Yeah, for cheese, it makes sense. I'm not familiar with cheesemongering,
There you go.
Well, okay, so this is how fresh is the narrative. So
yeah, how fresh? Is it something you've seen before? Is it something you haven't seen presented this way?
So, I mean, I don't think there's much I've seen of this particular type of storytelling in TTRPGs. So when it comes to this concept of, quote unquote, to use my phrase again, little guy simulator. I mean, there are other games that are, you can be little guys, like Wanderhome. You can be, Our Traveling Home, things like that. But I feel like this particular flavor of adventure, you're actually going through, there's some dungeon crawling element to it. I mean, yeah, you can do something similar in D&D or Dungeon World or, any other OSR type game, but the twist of this being different than your Merkberg or whatever is this does promote a lot of collaboration between folks at the table. It does allow for more a wholesome storytelling that makes you feel good about leaving the table, even if your character does clear through all their HP and is on the brink of death. You don't feel like there's no turning back, or there's no way of the story sets itself up in this game to help you feel like, oh no, this is just the natural progression of nature. This is just, so I really like that, again, wholesome spin on it that makes it feel cozy, which you're definitely not getting in Morkberg or...
Definitely not Morkberg.
Yeah.
Oh God. We did review that, actually. That was one of the games we reviewed in our last episode.
I've played it a handful of times and it's fun, but you got to be in a mindset for that one.
I think one shot is not the best way to experience the full narrative of Mausritter.
So you think that it's much more for longer campaigns than it is for a one shot?
Yeah, I think so, because a lot of one-shots do tend to devolve into combat.
Yeah.
Because that's just the nature of, I'm playing for 2 hours and none of us know how to finish a conversation, so fight.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I agree with you. I think that Mausritter is definitely a game that lends itself, which is good, it lends itself to a longer campaign. So if you're trying to turn it into a little, Secret of Nim Mouse campaign, you can do that. You know, and that actually is a great segue into the last category, which is the setting or the world. And I know we've actually kind of gone over this a few times, so this question's been answered. We've talked about how the lore of Mausritter allows for a ton of creativity in building your own adventure. The structure isn't rigid at all. You really very much are like, here's the box, have fun, go play in the sandbox. Let's talk a little bit about the last two in this category, which is immersion. How immersive is the game, and how complete does the game feel?
I think it's up to the player and like the table to determine how immersed they want to be. Something that I think is to the credit of this game as well is like, as we said, you can roll as many tables as you want to create as immersive and complex of a world as you wish, and it's up to everyone to decide how in depth they want to go, or if they just want to be, again, just a bunch of little rats meet mice, and they just want to go through a quick dungeon that was put together like roughshod in 5 minutes. You can also do that. So I feel like there's plenty of opportunities for immersion and roleplay in here.
You know, that said, I think that the game as it is, looking through this, the rules book, there is very little lore. There's very little like canon. Here's the world that you're in. It's very much up to the GM and the players to collaborate and build this world together, which I think is interesting, and it does allow for a lot of immersion. But you will need two very specific things. Number one, you need a GM who is willing to work with you about what you think this mouse world should be like.
Yes.
Period. Right? And that's the case for every tabletop game. Right.
Yeah.
But, and this one is a little less obvious, but for me specifically, I think that this can get so immersive that you definitely are going to need your safety tools.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You are playing animals, and you are going to get into fights.
Yep, and you do die.
So it is incredibly immersive, and tread with caution.
Yes, it's definitely a game. I think that what's interesting is that the world is deliberately left incomplete. I think if I had to give this, like, if I have to say that, like, how complete this world was, it's not. It's deliberate. It's a deliberate thing because it's meant for the players and the GM to flesh out this world together. And I think that that's a very interesting take. It makes those lines and veils that much more important.
Yeah, if you're somebody that is primarily a D&D player and you're used to, I just have this right here because I'm literally running this in an hour. You know, if you just happen to, like, if you're used to having like full books of lore and the exact everything that you need to run a game in a full book, Mausritter is not for you if you think that you're going to be getting something like that. For sure. But if you are looking to branch beyond, like, again, this world is not as complete as the Sword Coast.
Really, a lot of other games that have very established worlds and a very established lore. This is very much meant for you guys to establish the lore. And I do think it's interesting because I do feel like that makes it less, like, more casual and less rigid overall. You know?
I think its incompleteness actually lends itself to a very interesting play that you could do, because there is no established lore. We don't know what world we're in. You could do a side-along campaign of Mausritter in Baldur's Gate.
You could.
You know, you could just have a party of mice following your adventurers, completely unknown to them, helping them out through little mice actions. Or you could just go on a picnic and play Mausritter.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
you can do
in the game.
In the game. Oh my god.
Have your PCs funny. Play Mausritter.
In the game. Oh god. But yeah, that said, that brings us to our rating for Mausritter. So if it's a Weal, Woe, or which one would you guys pick for this game?
I'd say Weal.
Yeah. I absolutely say Weal.
I'm definitely introducing my players to this. I love it.
I also would say Weal. I think this is this is a fun little game to play. Once you've got the mechanics nailed down, for sure. Can you run a one-shot in this? Yes. Is it going to be as immersive as a campaign? Absolutely not. I do think that this is a great game to have fun with and to play. Like I said, with all games that we like, they're not perfect. There's probably stuff that could be improved upon, but hey, it's a fun game to give it to try if you're interested in that. So Mausritter gets a wheel from us. Amazing.
Yeah, very good game.
And
make sure you read the small text.
Yes, read the small text. Make sure you read the examples of gameplay too. Those are actually very helpful.
Yes.
But that said, that's Mausritter for us. Our next game is also very popular. I remember it blew through its Kickstarter so fast. Let's talk about Wanderhome.
I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm so excited too. Wanderhome is such a great game. Yeah. So that said, Wanderhome, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of Wanderhome. Like I said, Wanderhome is by Jade Dragon, and it was published by Possum Creek Games. It uses a system called Belonging Without Belonging, or it's also known as No Dice, No Masters, which means no GM and no dice rolls at all, which is also very interesting. So, Amber, why don't we start with you? What are your feelings on Wanderhome?
Oh man, I love Wanderhome. It's such a good game. And like, I've played a fair amount of like other Belonging Outside Belonging games. J-Dragon has another one called Sleepaway that is everyone is essentially like members of a sleepaway camp, and like the sleepaway camp is like, anyway, the exact opposite mood of Wanderhome.
Oh wow.
Yes. So I love this concept, again, like as we were saying about Mausritter, of everyone having a seat at the table and everyone is equal at the table, that the mechanics put everyone on that level playing field so that no one's min-maxing, no one is, at one advantage or another. It really is here to be present as a collaborative storytelling game where you are coming to the table to create something beautiful and immersive and warm that you wouldn't have had otherwise outside of this game. So it's and I really feel like the Belonging Outside Belonging system is wonderful for that, because it, again, does promote collaboration in the pieces of exchanging tokens or spending tokens. I can't say enough great things about Wanderhome.
For sure. Cass, what are your feelings on Wanderhome?
So I know that we were talking about how cute Mausritter is. I think Wanderhome is cuter. It is genuinely just one of the coziest, softest games that I've come across recently. And Belonging Within Belonging is great. I'm very unfamiliar with it. But I think that especially with this emerging attitude in TTRPGs, it's a great call. This attitude of like the GM is not your enemy.
Right.
And by removing the GM entirely, you no longer have to deal with people you don't have to deal with that worldview anymore.
Exactly.
There is, I love the system of you are rewarded for kindness and you are punished for unkindness. And it's not even a real punishment. It's just a, hey, please don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Or you get banished forever, pretty much. Like, your character doesn't die in this game. They just get yeeted. Like, we don't want to talk to you anymore. You can leave and don't come back.
And it's great. It is interesting that everyone is an animal, and it does not matter what your family is. I think that was my favorite little flavor text in the manual for this game, which was not every family is made up of the same animal, and frankly, that's none of your business.
It's so great. It's amazing.
You're so right. You're so right, which hits me as a mixed race person. Like, none of my family looks like me. Don't ask me why. That's such a weird question.
It's like, it's not your business,
Why do you need to know that?
Exactly. So, and I agree with you. I think the Wanderhome's mechanics are so unique to me because, again, you don't have to worry about optimization. You don't have to worry about any of the stuff that you would normally worry about with combat-based games, because it's not combat-based, it's collaboration-based. So you want, you know, you're trying. It's such a soft and nice game because it really isn't about how hardcore you are. It's about, you know, talking to people. In a way, it's great because it gives you like kind of some basic social skills to use in the manual as well. It even goes as far as to give you language to use to engage in discussion with your other players. And when we talk about belonging without belonging and no dice, no masters, the interesting thing that Wanderhome does is it does give you a choice. If you want someone to be a guide because you're not quite ready to kind of engage with the game as a group together collaboratively, you can have someone be the guide, and they'll be responsible for the kit, which are the NPCs in the game, and they can do the voices and things like that, but they don't have any real power. It's just that they have the responsibility of kind of handling the world itself as you build it. Everything else is done as a group, to the point where there's a mechanic in the rules that says the person who speaks the least has to make this call. And I'm just like, I love that because it encourages everyone at the table to participate. So you don't have time to feel like you're neglected or alone or like your character doesn't matter, because it does. Your character does. And that's something that I really, really enjoy about Wanderhome. And again, when it comes to like its flexibility, unmatched. This thing can be twisted upside down, inside out, and into a pretzel, as long as you stay within that realm of community and everything's a journey. I think if there was any game that embodied the phrase "it's about the journey, not the destination," it's Wanderhome. Because that's the premise. You're all wanderers. And what's more interesting is there is a class called the Veteran, but the requirement of the Veteran is that your sword must always remain sheathed. And the moment you unsheathe that blade, you're yeeted from the game. And it's like, hey, sorry, you can't be in the game anymore, bye. But the character, not the player, obviously. But It's very interesting to me, again, and with the use of tokens, when you read how you earn them and how you spend them, it's all about kindness, collaboration, finding out about people, getting to know people. I love that. I just love all of that.
So, I mean, I've had like the luxury of being able to like, I got dinner with J Dragon once at PAX U last year, and
I'm envious.
I didn't know they were showing up to dinner. It was just all of a sudden J Dragon was here, and I was like, huh?
Your brain blue screened, restarted.
I was like, shit, I'm having dips. But you know, we spent a lot of time, like the entire table was just talking about Wanderhome and like how much like that moment where like, and you know, we kind of felt like we were embodying really like the spirit of the game and of just coming together, sharing a meal together, of like all of these, you know, bits and pieces of the community that like don't normally like fit together, but we are creating like our own little space. And like Jay was just like sat there like the entire time. And then took some scallion pancake, and then, but like I mean, just really the way that this game again forces folks. I mean, D&D is a combat simulator first, role-playing game second. The fact that this game is less about being in conflict with somebody else and more about like resolving whatever tension.
And it's so interesting too, because your characters can be informed by trauma, or they can be informed by like I forgot what the other thing was, but I know one of them is very trauma based, and it's about healing from that trauma or dealing with that trauma in some way. And I was like, this is so interesting to me, especially as someone who really, really buys into the role playing aspect. Those moments are so fantastic to me, and there's so many opportunities for those moments in game. You know, with the mechanics alone. And like I said, there are mechanics, but they're not restrictive or constraining in the way that like say D&Ds are, you know. When it comes to speed, there's not really that much to remember. You kind of remember it as a group. Like I don't think that there's a real way to get hung up on mechanics either. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, no, I absolutely would. I think it is worth noting that even the game will tell you, like, there are a few directions that you can take with your roleplay. Discuss with your table to see if you want to do a more trauma-centric narrative, or if you just want a pastoral, let's all create and explore a world together with no stakes.
Yeah.
And it gives you the setup for potentially a trauma-based roleplay by this is a world post-war.
Mm-hmm.
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 So
but not in the way that where there's combat or fighting. It's more in a here, like, how are people dealing with the aftermath kind of a way, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And mechanically, I think that's the main thing to keep in mind is just what style of roleplay that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, yeah, that might be the easiest mechanic that I've ever heard. Is just be kind. In one form or another, be kind whenever you can.
It's like, here's a game where you don't have to be a dick. Holy crap. Explode.
Here's a game where you can't be a dick.
Yes. Oh man. But that said, let's get right into the next fun part about it, because there's so many fun parts to Wanderhome. The story and narrative of it. Which is really interesting because you create the story and narrative, so it's I guess it's as fresh as you want it to be, in a way. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like at least the play kit that you can get for free gives you some starting points on how to establish the narrative, how to, like, where to, some tinder for the flame that you're going to be starting as you start, as you play the game. So I love that, because if you're coming at this game not really knowing how to do something that's a lot more freestyle and free form, I like that.
It gives you some guidelines for doing
correct.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we can know, like, okay, what are the seasons, what's like the type of holidays that exist in this world, but like really there's some other pieces where you do just create a lot of the, again, more of the world, more of the like features of nature. Sorry, I'm so obsessed with this game.
It's a fabulous. No, I think it's fabulous. And the interesting thing about Wanderhome too is a lot of people get hung up when they're like they get decision paralysis when options are too open and stuff. And I think that's one of the advantages that Wanderhome actually does have is the fact that you are operating as a group. So it's not just you trying to come up with an interesting world for your players. All of the players are involved in making an interesting world for the players, which I think is neat.
I think this is one of those games where it's going to be as engaging and fresh as the players that are playing, right? If you have a group of people who love a combat simulator and you just convince them to try this out, they might not have as much fun without an experienced storyteller.
Yeah.
To help guide them through, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
But if you've got a lot of people who, really love the role play aspect of tabletop role playing games, then you're going to have a great time. Like, I looked at the art for this game and immediately went, Frog and Toad? Is that Frog and Toad?
Yes.
I would love to be in the Frog and Toad universe. In Wanderhome, you can be that. And I think it's as engaging as you're willing to make it.
Yeah,
and that's
for sure.
a really interesting thing to have in, a board game, effectively.
For sure, I agree. It's so. Oh my god! Again, we could all talk about Wanderhome forever. We love it. You could tell that we all love it. Like I said, the only downside is that it is built for a very specific kind of player. It's for someone who's looking for a break from combat-centric stuff. If you're not a big optimizer or into essentially combat, this gives you a whole new venue to explore the world of TTRPGs. And something else that I really like is your leveling up isn't necessarily leveling up in the traditional sense. You basically choose a goal, and that's how you level up as a character. Like, here's your new goal for this next season, and I love that. And I think also too with Wanderhome, the game can be as long or as short as you want it to be. really does lend itself to a short or long campaign. It's very flexible in that sense, which I appreciate, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like the time I've played Wanderhome before this, the GM, big air quotes, the person that was facilitating.
The guide. I believe they refer to it as the guide in the book. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They were like, I just want to play Wanderhome as like a festival. Like we're just gonna be our little wanderers, and we come across like a harvest festival, and how are we interacting with this new town that we're not a part of, and just being like doing little carnival games for like 3 hours, and it was so sweet. And we could have continued going for ages, and it was just like we just, you know, it's just a nice game. It's just so gentle too. Like when you read the book, it's like kind of like stepping your toes into a warm bath. Like when I say cozy, this is the definition of cozy for me. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, this is the coziest game I've ever seen.
Yeah, and the cool thing too, and we're going to get into the world section now a little bit, because this is something that I love about Wanderhome, is that so if Mausritter gives you a lot of openness and flexibility with the world your mice are living in, Wanderhome gives you a lot of flexibility with the characters you're creating. In opposition to that, because it establishes a world, it establishes a lore, but like these things inform who you are and how you interact with things. Because the first thing I say is everyone in this world is fundamentally good. There are no evil people here in the traditional sense. There are people who have been informed by trauma, who may be acting on trauma, but those people are few and far between. This is a world that's just experienced a war. It's been, you know, it's after that war has happened. It's not conflict driven in that sense, you know, and they tell you, here are the seasons, here are the months in the seasons, here's what happens in the seasons. And every season ends with a festival. You know, it tells you these things to help you world build and to help you establish kind of what the world you're in looks like and the kind of world that you're journeying through, you know, and I appreciate that, because it having those basic things really does help you build a great story to tell, you know, with other people. If it's collaborative storytelling at its finest, I would say.
And I feel like it really does, like I mentioned earlier, it puts everyone in an equal playing field. And so everyone is invited to this table, to this game, to this space, regardless of background, ability, you know, his personal history, whatever. You can find a piece of yourself that in Wanderhome that maybe you might not have felt comfortable facilitating or like accepting. Like there's a whole piece in here about failure, and I know this is more about like setting and world, but I feel like this piece about failure ties into it a little bit.
Yeah. We can throw that in the additional notes. That's fine. We can wrap those two together.
Yeah. Well, it says like, instead, Wanderhome as a game isn't preoccupied with failure. You don't often fail in life. Sometimes you struggle to do something or get passed over or do something you wish you hadn't or give up. Even those moments aren't truly failures in a pejorative sense. Mistakes maybe, suffering at the cruelty of others, and listening to your body and your brain and accepting their natural limitations. Oh my God.
Yeah.
As like somebody who was diagnosed with autism in their 30s, who has been struggling with I've been struggling with my autoimmune disease for like 14 years now. And like even today, my body had what I considered a failure. But like, oh my God, just hearing that, reading
like,
that is
it's
so
okay.
radical.
Yeah,
it's so radical.
The other thing that's interesting about Wanderhome too, and this is regarding LGBTQIA plus identity as well, is that in Wanderhome, they specifically tell you that they use gendered language, but it's a suggestion. It's not a mandatory thing. You don't have to ascribe yourself to a gender. You don't have to use that language. They're literally just using that language to, you know, describe something, which I think is they give you the freedom to explore that side of yourself as well. And I think that's so important.
I don't remember if this was a specific call to the ragamuffin background or not, but in character creation, there was an aspect that it honestly felt very, it felt almost Undertale-y, where it gives you this list of like 8 or 9 traits and says choose 2 that you are and 2 that you decidedly are not. And some of the answers were a boy, a girl, skilled, creative, respectful, attentive. But you can just decide, not boy. Like if you don't, whether that means that you use she, her pronouns, whether that means that you're masc but not a boy, or femme but not a woman, or you are a boy but you are femme, doesn't matter. You could also just choose not to include gender on that list at all. And I think that's, especially since it does say any use of gendered language is an opportunity for you to ignore, explore.
Take it or leave it. It's all up to you. It really gives you freedom, but in the context of a world. And you can tell that someone put a lot of time and effort into really thinking through this game for people who want to play a game of this nature. Do you have any additional thoughts on the game? I know we have a ton, but
to your point, like to your piece, Cass, I was going through you were like, I don't know if this is just in the Vagabond, and I went through and like there's an option like that, big quotes like that in each playbooks, but like Vagabond, for instance, they have liar, cheat, thief, hero, lady, gentleman. I love the dancer one, actually.
Dancer's my favorite class.
Yes. Choose 2 that you are and 2 you wish you were better at being. Oh my God. Upbeat, honest, hopeful, handsome, beautiful. So like even that, it's not particularly gendered, because you can be a beautiful man or a handsome woman or a beautiful non-binary moth
person,
like it's just and then choose.
That is important to note too. Something I love about this game is that insects are also valid. You can be a like person-sized moth, or any kind of insect that you wish to be, because I know that there are people who are like, animal games sometimes animal games can be just mammalian, for lack of a better term, mammalian or reptilian. Sometimes if for a little extra flavor. This is probably one of the few games I've seen where it's like, also if you want to be a moth that's person-sized, you can do that too, and that's just a little tidbit that I love.
Not to bring this back to 5e, but I did just, my partner is running a game that I'm not in, and I was watching as one of the players tried to make a person moth, and they basically had to homebrew an entirely new class using one of the 50 books that no one has as like a reference, and it took them like a week just to get stats down. They couldn't make a mini for it very easily, so
it's nice to have that option.
I saw Moth Wrangler and I went, I could just be a shepherd.
Yep, there's a shepherd or a moth tender. I believe there's a class called moth tender as well. Yeah. Weal or woe, friends? What are we gonna give it?
Absolutely a woe. God,
I've never heard of the worst game ever.
Worst.
Absolute Weal.
Yes, definitely a Weal for all of us. Is it a perfect game? No, probably not. I really do think that if you're going to play Wanderhome, you need to be ready for a specific kind of game. It doesn't, there's no dice, there's no game master. You have your playbooks. I think you have note cards, and like there's one other thing that I think you need for the game. And it's literally just record keeping. You're just keeping track of all the things. Because I forgot if this is the game where you pick like natural features. No, this is I don't think it's the same game. Yeah.
You can pick natural features.
Yeah, so you do pick, like you're building this world together. So you have to, it's record keeping mostly. But again, you have to go in expecting a very gentle, a very soft game where you're collaborating with others. If you're a diehard, like optimizing combat, I want to mess things up, light things on fire, and stab people, this is not your game. Don't do this game. Don't play this game. This is a jam for people who honestly are kind of tired of combat and want to experience something different and want to try like, hey, what happens if we were just nice people? We weren't assholes.
Like this literally is Animal Crossing, the TTRPG. If you want to play a TTRPG version of your Animal Crossing New Horizons island, this is it. Do this.
This is the game to play. So overarching Weal from our crew because we love that game. And now we're going to move into our last game called The Quiet Year. It was a popular game during COVID, and it was designed and written by Avery Alder. It also uses the belonging without belonging system, and this engine was actually first developed for Dream Askew and Dream Apart, which is a fun fact about Quiet Year. So the premise of A Quiet Year is basically it's a post-apocalyptic setting where you're recovering from a post-apocalyptic event, and you have 1 year of peace and quiet with which to do something. You are on a time limit, so there is a catastrophic event that is scheduled to happen at a specific point in your year. And after that, the game is over. So it does have a definitive ending, which I think is different from most games mechanically. But yeah, let's talk about our thoughts on A Quiet Year.
I also love this game.
Yeah.
Just looks at camera. I love this game. No, it's...
Wow, good vibes on the cozy game episode?
Yes. Who could imagine? No, this is a great game. The interesting thing about this game is that you're all drawing the map together this time, because you actually... one of the things in the game is that you draw out a map, and you draw the different things as you create them, which I think is very cool.
It's a collaborative world building game, which is an interesting premise.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's not like role playing in a traditional sense where I am my mouse, and I am taking my mouse and I am going to, like, you're really, I don't want to say you're playing God, but you're like playing the map, like, you're playing the civilization. Oh my God, you know what? This is like Age of Empires. If you want to play Age of Empires.
I've actually seen that comparison made. I was going to say you're the voice of a community rather than so you're a voice of a group of people rather than like just one person. And you don't actually have named characters in that sense either. It's you, and you may occasionally have named characters, but they don't impact the story the same way like your individual characters might, in a traditional roleplay game.
There's a level of detachment that the game demands. Like, it's in the rulebook. You need to spend an equal amount of time being an omniscient and uninterested onlooker who's just making choices, and being, an unnamed villager in the towns that you're creating. There are 3 TTRPG pillars, right? There's exploration, roleplay, and combat.
Yes.
And if Wanderhome is fully roleplay, and Mausritter is a pretty solid combination of all 3, I would say that for those that are really, really into the exploration pillar, Quiet Year's your game.
It is.
Yes, it really is. So, and just to get more into with the mechanics, you have a deck of cards, and the cool thing is they have special cards for the game, but you can also play this with a regular deck of playing cards. It just has to be a complete deck of 52 cards. Each suit represents a season, with the final season being winter. And I believe it's Spades is the winter suit, and the King of Spades signals the end of the game, because that's your catastrophic event. That occurs, that and they leave it open-ended. You may or may not survive. It's just where they end the game.
Yeah.
So you can choose to end the game on a cliffhanger. Will they survive? We don't know.
I actually really like playing this game instead of using like normal playing cards. I like using a tarot deck because you can take the minor arcana.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that version before. That's cool.
Yeah. You can take a tarot deck and because the different suits correspond to different the suits in tarot correspond to different suits in a normal playing deck.
Yeah.
But you can take the imagery and the meaning of the card in the tarot and apply it to the prompts in that the game gives you. So I love that, like, extra hard load, but that's just me.
That's extra hard. I think if you're a newbie though, like, and you're getting you want to explore TTRPGs outside of the ones that we hear the most about. One, I do think this is a great game to start with. Starting with A Quiet Year is a very simple premise. Again, you don't have to worry about dice. You don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. I think the only thing you have to worry about is 1d6, and you only use it to represent contempt. because I think that's a contempt token. Or no, sorry. The D6 is to represent projects because it's weeks of projects that you do. You do have a token that's for contempt, which is what instead of verbally disagreeing with someone in this game, you put a contempt token to show that you disagree with this person. It's probably the one mechanic that I think is a little fiddly, but I was like, I feel like this would work in certain settings, but wouldn't work in others. I don't know how you guys feel about that, you know?
I have a lot of thoughts on the contempt system.
Okay.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
I'm somebody who struggles with rejection-sensitive dysphoria, right?
Okay.
Where my autism brain says, tell me when I do something wrong.
Right.
But if you tell me that I'm doing something wrong, but you can't or won't tell me what it is, I am going to cry. Nothing will be fixed, and I'm just going to get angry.
Right.
So if that is the kind of mindset that you have, and especially if you're just playing a game with somebody, with like friends that maybe you don't know that well, or, you know, the kind of people that you know or that you don't know will be there unconditionally, right? This can be a really challenging system to have because it says outright, you don't get to disagree. You don't get to discuss this. If something happens and you don't like it, you can put a contempt token forward. And if you choose to retaliate against that, you can remove your contempt by, you know, taking an action to retaliate or by somebody else gaining your forgiveness, right? But that's a really hard system to implement if you don't know how the other person is thinking.
Yes.
Right.
Again, RSD is a huge topic of conversation. Not only all of my tables, but just my life in general. So heard on that. And so the one time I've played, we kind of, I mean, again, this is just the beauty of TTRPGs, and you can take something about it and say, actually, I want to change it. We turned contempt tokens into like, oh, I love that decision you made, as like a little like way to bolster the community, even like,
right,
you know, like how in Fallout sometimes it's like, oh, everyone liked this, everyone hated this. It's kind of like that, like giving you like, oh, everyone liked this. So
it's probably the one mechanic that I'm the least comfortable with. Like if there's a way to play the game without the mechanic or modifying the mechanic where it's, again, because of RSD, like I suffer from that too, to a lesser, I feel like it's to a lesser degree, mostly because what I do for a living involves a lot of that. But anyway, I think it's conducive to creating a more negative environment than you intend to with a game like this. And especially when you're trying to create a cozy game, a game that everyone can kind of relax and lean into. I don't think that this mechanic is that conducive to it. I understand that that when it was created with a specific set of, like, as part of a rule the limit thing. So like you don't have to, you don't end up like arguing for 3 hours about whether or not a bridge should be built. I get it. But I do think that there's a better way to go about it that makes it more friendly for people who are neurodivergent or who have suffered from trauma related to rejection-sensitive dysphoria. That's fair. So I would love to see an alternative method of playing that doesn't necessarily involve those contempt tokens that they talk about in the game mechanically.
The goal of this game seems to be like political realism.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fine if that's the game that you're playing, but make sure you're playing with people that you know can put down the game.
Yeah.
You know,
and walk
when
away
it
if
comes
they
time.
need to.
Well,
for sure.
I mean, and to your point earlier, Vixie, that you said like, oh, this is a game a lot of people play during COVID. Like, this is, I had like a long distance relationship during like the first couple like years of COVID, and this was one of the first games that like I played with that partner, and like we were both suffering from like just having no social battery because of COVID. Right. So yeah, if you have to be in that mindset, and like if you're not through pandemic or I don't know, political upheaval, you don't want to really play with those topics. You kind of like have to keep your lines and veils like close to your heart.
Yeah,
gotta put
this
in
is
the
definitely a
work to
Lines
make
and
this-
Veils game.
Yeah.
Make sure you're very aware of what those are, and make sure you have some kind of safety, like a card or anything to signify that, like, I'm not comfortable with this, present when you're playing this game.
You've got to put in the work
yeah.
to make it cozy. It's not inherently
Yes.
cozy.
It's not inherently cozy because of at least not mechanically. It's not inherently
Yeah.
cozy. As far as the world goes, which is our next topic, or not necessarily world, the setting. I think story narrative. Story narrative is where I'm going with that. So yes, as far as the story narrative goes, I do think that it's a very interesting premise where you don't experience the post-apocalyptic event necessarily. You are kind of dealing with the aftermath. Similar to Wanderhome, but more grim, a little more grimdark, I think, because you're facing another inevitable catastrophe, but at least you have time to basically build something before then, if that makes sense.
Right. Again, you have to be like in the right mindset for it, because if you're like, oh shit, we just went through one catastrophe in real life and now we have to watch two happen back to back in this game that we are playing as a respite from it, like that can be a little
daunting
wonky on your mental health. But if you're ready to contend with, I don't know, oh god, hold on, I'm just going through some of these like winter pieces. If you're ready to contend with people going missing in the winter, or children and animals crying, and you have to have a discussion about it.
Yeah. Talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's winter specifically is a very hard season in the game. I think the way that what they advise you to do in the book is to start with spring to get a feel for the mechanics, and then work your way through the other seasons now that you've got a sense of the game. With winter probably being the hardest. Winter is probably the hardest mode, I would say, and especially again when you have to be very aware of your lines and veils.
There's a definite difficulty spike in autumn. Like that's when the game stops being quite as cozy because things are getting colder and more dangerous. But yeah, for all the crap that I just gave this game, right? I love a political narrative. I love a political narrative. But when it comes to RPG politics, one of the main things that I look for is not necessarily a magic system, but it always ends up being a magic system just because we're all fantasy-brained nerds. A way to keep yourself from being cornered. Because we've got this sense of learned helplessness with politics.
Right, exactly.
So when you're playing a political narrative, there has to be a way for the players to not feel like they have nothing that they can do about this.
Right.
And with the system as open-ended and political as the Quiet Year, which I genuinely love this as a concept for me, but finding somebody who would be able to play on the same page as me, really, really difficult. Because it's so easy to go, okay, well, this wouldn't work because of this.
Right, exactly. So.
And, I would have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. It's not a game you just like pick up having never touched a TTRPG before. It's not a game that you pick, well, maybe if you've never played a TTRPG. But like, it's definitely not a game you want to pick up with strangers. Like,
it's definitely not. I don't think this is a great game to pick up with a new table. Like if you're just building a new table, you can't let's play Quiet Year. Let's go into the apocalypse. Like, no, you're better off playing Workborg at that point. So, which even for all of its intents and purposes, a little bit friendlier game to play. What's funny is I also think the premise is really engaging, but I think as far as like flexibility goes, there's not that much of it in this game. And I'd love to see more of that. But it's a very specific game that does a very specific thing. And that's the game. Which brings us into the last little bit, the setting world. So let's talk about creativity within the lore, the immersion, and how complete everything feels. Yeah. See, for me, what I think it's very interesting is that you decide the setting together. Like you all decide what you have in abundance, what you have in scarcity together. You decide like, oh, where do we want to set this? A coastal town. Cool. We have no fish. We have no drinkable water, but we have a fuck ton of clothes. You know,
let's see what we can do with that.
Let's see what we can do with that. But yeah, it's like you can make all these choices before you start the game, and I do think that gives an interesting level of immersion to the game, and then you just sort of build off of that throughout the game as well. But so it's I guess in a way it is flexible in terms of like what you can create. Where it becomes inflexible is where in the mechanics with what you can do. You know, within the world.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, again, you're very rigid as to like the actual process and the order of things and how they move along. But what I love, because, you know, they ask you the questions and once you actually get to the actual questions, but depending on what card you draw, the sky's the limit. You can do really whatever you want and imagine whatever you want. And again, that's why I felt like bringing in the tarot cards for some extra flavor was really great and like provided some extra like inspiration.
Context. Yeah.
Exactly. But because this is so open-ended, I feel like, and it'll kind of similar to what we were saying with Wanderhome, it's like everyone gets their own piece of the puzzle, and that helps, at least for me and the types of players I tend to play with. If everyone has that piece of ownership to it, then they're going to be more likely to be more immersed in the world that we're building because you have that, you own that. That is something that came from your mind. I still occasionally actually think about my Quiet Year game because it just, you know, we were just that like immersed and like in tune with the story, and we were just like, oh my god, what the fuck is gonna happen? Like,
One of the things I do like, I know we talked about this being a little like, you know, a little grimdark for what the nature of the game that it is. But one of the things I do like is that it has a definitive ending. So you can, if you had to play this and you only had like a couple of hours to play, you would just put the King of Spades a little higher up in your winter pile, and then boom, the game's over, it's done. I appreciate that because it keeps you from basically being stuck for 6 hours drawing a map, at least mechanically. But like I said, it doesn't take away from like all the negatives that we've talked about.
So I'm going to be very upfront here. I have not played it. I just, you know, read the rules. But I know that with the right table, this can be a phenomenal game. Like I can
it definitely is.
The pieces are there, but it is so table specific that to me it almost feels more like a world building tool than an RPG game.
I've seen it used that way too.
I would pull this out if I needed to build a new homebrew that I wanted my players to enjoy and feel like they had a world, like a piece, as you were saying, in building the world. And then I would probably make them, you know, make their character in somebody else's piece.
Yeah, they had them do it in Adventure Zone.
Really?
Graduation.
I did not know that.
I did not know that.
Oh God, what was it? It was the season after graduation. They built their world in the Quiet Year, and then I forgot the actual game that they used after that. Graduation was such a mess that.
No, that's all right. I love the fact that they used a Quiet Year to world build, but that's what I was saying. I'd heard of people using a Quiet Year to do world building because it is such a strong game to build a world in. But I think you're right, Cass. I think it is very table specific when it comes to the content of the game.
I don't want to take away from it because it's a absolutely unique concept, and like I said, with the right table, it's got to be a great game, but it does feel less like a game than anything else we've talked about. You know, it feels more like a character creation menu, but for worlds.
But like, for worlds, for sure.
Coaster Tycoon, like it's a tycoon game.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so final ratings. What are we going to give it?
Ooh, absolutely a Weal, but like be prepared to be emotionally devastated.
I'm going to say personal Weal, but for my usual table, probably a woe. They're not super into this kind of thing.
I gotcha. So I think, and this is funny because it's only episode 2, but this is going to be the first time I've ever done this on this show. I think this is the first time that I'm going to give a game mixed results. Yeah, this is
they rolled a 7.
They rolled a 7. Oh no. But I think that there are aspects to this game that I really like. I think there's a lot of really good gripping things in this game that I really like. They arouse my curiosity. And when it comes to the world setting, the story, and the lore, which is what I'm big on when it comes to games, I really love that. I enjoy that. When it comes to the mechanics and how they operate, what kind of people need to be at the table to play the game, I think that's where this game sort of lets me down a little bit. Because I do, like I said, I know what it feels like to deal with RSD. I know what it feels like to have to contend with that, and I don't want to put anyone through that unnecessarily, especially when the topic of the game itself is already in the grimdark category. So that's where my Weal for the Weal for the world, the setting, and the lore, the woe for the mechanics and sort of the backdrop in which the game presents itself. So yeah, that's the first time I've ever had to do mixed results, but damn, here we are. So that said, those are all 3 games in review. Which one are we going to choose as our favorite?
What's my mood today?
Just rolls a dice. Oh, Lord.
I mean, day-to-day play, I would pick Mausritter.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Wanderhome, hands down, bar none, no question, Wanderhome.
I think for me, it's a toss-up between Wanderhome and Mausritter. For our Barkeeps choice, though, I do think that for me, it's going to be Mausritter because that's the game that I personally am most excited to play.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wanderhome sounds like Wanderhome feels like taking a Tylenol after a really bad headache. If you've got DM burnout, that's the game.
That's it.
Oh, yeah. For me, Wanderhome just sounds like such a nice game to play. Again, it's like running a warm bath and sliding in and just having your cup of tea in the bath and enjoying yourself. That's what Wanderhome feels like to me. And I would play that game hands down in a heartbeat, but there's something about Mausritter that I really, really wants to make me play it. So with a vote of 2-1, I think our Barkeep's choice is Mausritter, with Wanderhome being the beloved honorable mention, because we still love this game so much. Next week, join us as we play a test play of Mausritter, where we will be playing with little mouse knights as they strive to do something heroic in their little mouse world. Thank you again to our wonderful Barkeeps for joining us tonight. I appreciate your reviews. As I said, guys, these are just our opinions. These are the games that we're excited to play and to share with you. If you have a different opinion, that's totally fine. You don't have to take us at our word. Try the games yourself. The point is to introduce you to games outside of the typical fare you see everywhere else and give it a shot. Let us know what you think. Have you played the game? Do you see it in a different perspective from us? Have you found a way to play the game that maybe subverts some of the things that we said were an issue for us specifically as players and GMs? Let us know. Stay in touch with us, and we'll see you next week for Mausritter. Bye now.